And we're up in. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. It's a joy to be with you once again as we talk about what's happening in the United States. We're looking at ICE deployed in Chicago. They're on their way to Portland. And even though they're being deployed to blue cities now, I believe they're going to go to red cities also, because we're looking at uh, something very interesting. We're looking at a militarization of American life. We need to talk about that. We need to look at the financial incentives of incarcerating these persons. We'll be exploring that as the days go forward because they're being housed in private prisons and they are being put to work. We're wondering how the family separation is going because indeed that is now policy. Families are being separated, parents from their children, parents from their children. So we need to look at this and be very, very clear that everybody can get scooped up here. Indeed, the Chicago ICE raid, there were Mexican Americans or Mexicans, even though Mexicans and Venezuelans, they're Americans, they're just not United States citizens. They're from the southern part of the hemisphere. But you got Mexicans, you got Venezuelans, and you also got Nigerians. They were all swept up. So, everyone, please carry your identification with you because you will need to do that. Help us with the algorithm. Please like and share the show. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook. I need you to become my friend there. Meet me on X. Please join me on X at Santita J. Santita Jackson IG on Instagram. Santita Jackson IG on Instagram. And, of course, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. I share it with the Reverend Jesse Jackson Facebook page as well. And like and share, like and share. Shows like ours have we get depressed in the algorithm. We just do. But that's okay. All you have to do is pass it along. There's a way around it. But there's not a way around the issues that we must face and live with from day to day. So follow Snowman and Bernadette and Mike and like and share. A member of the family is back. We're always so happy to have from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, Bryce Green. And we had to find out what he thought about the state of the nation right now. We are about to turn 250 years of age. That is uh, the Declaration of Independence. And every empire uh, is at an inflection point at the age of 250. And we are too. Dr. King asked the question more than 60 years ago, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Well, the question is, where do we go from here? And what do you make about what happened in Chicago? What's happening all around the country? We need to talk about it. And there are different aspects of this that we need to discuss. I need you to get registered to vote. I don't just need you to get registered to vote. You need to get registered to vote. This to me really goes beyond your party. This is a patriotic issue, really. This is about the country and who we are and where we're going to go. You have a Republican president, Dwight Eisenhower, who warned us about the dangers of the military industrial complex overtaking our physical and spiritual lives. You have Barry Goldwater, a far right wing candidate of his time in 1964, warning about the dangers of an authoritarian presidency. There's some people who spoke wisely and they rose above their parties to do so because they cared about the country. Think of our first president, our founding president, George Washington, who did a few things. Was he a slaveholder? Absolutely. Did he have his slaves' teeth? Yes, yes. But he also refused to be a king. The founding father said, "You could be a king. Let's do that." He said, "No, no, no. We just left that behind. We're not going to have a monarchy here. We are a republic." And he also chose not to be a member of a party. He said, "No, I'm here to serve the people, not a party." And he warned us that being tied to a party would tie us to a party and not to the people. And look at where we are. Look at where we are now. You have the Republican and Democratic parties, the left wing and the right wing. It's one bird. Think about that. Think about that. The
Right.
Republicans are blaming the Democrats for the shutdown. The fact is, the Republicans refused to have votes on the 29th and the 30th of September that forced a shutdown. Are we overspending? Yes. But we don't want to look at where we're overspending. We're overspending in the military. We are. We are overspending in foreign misadventures. Yeah. America has enough money to feed, clothe, and house everybody and to guarantee health care. Yeah, the Democrats are right to shut this down on health care. But where the Republicans and Democrats miss the mark is here. We need to start rewarding the health insurance industry, because that's what this is, and come up with a universal single payer system. Cut out the middleman, cut them out. They need to find another way of working, another way to make their money instead of off of my misery. Think about that. I have to wait to find out if I can get a life saving treatment. Are you serious? No. There are a lot of questions that we need to ask. And we need to ask, what are they doing with these detained people? That's right, the GEO group, Core Civic, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We need to ask, what is it like to have masked military personnel walking up and down our streets? Bryce Green, fairness and accuracy in reporting. My mother said, you better make very, very sure that when you are out and about, you are speaking perfect English. Make sure, because they are scooping up everybody. So, Bryce Green, we're your neighbors just to the west. You're in Indiana. Look, what do you make of these Chicago ice raids? We can just start there and just branch on out from there.
Well, I mean, it's a very disturbing turn of events. It's a very uh, worrying scene when you have federal agents marching around Chicago. Well, I mean, Chicago PD was already kind of like an army occupying the entire town of Chicago. Everywhere you look, every time I go there, I'm always shocked at just the level of force that's projected. But now we're seeing this level of force amplified and also being turned on the population directly, not in a passive way, but in more of an active way. And this is something that, as you mentioned, like both parties are kind of two heads of the same dragon. This is
Mhm.
something that's been building up over the last 2 decades of the erosion of American constitutional liberties and the enhancement of the American security state. A lot of people like to put this on Trump and Stephen Miller, and while those are the individuals who are currently the the vanguard of this anti-immigration push, of this racist, violent occupation of our cities, they're really only the culmination of multiple presidents over multiple administrations, all making policies that contributed to it. I mean, just think back to uh, the year 2000. Back when I was 2 years old, there was no Department of Homeland Security.
Mhm.
This simply didn't exist. But after 9/11, this bureaucracy, this sprawling, massive network of fusion centers and counterterrorism missions and border patrol was deployed, and waiting in the wings for someone to give the go to really turn that apparatus on the population. And it was increasing in funding under Obama. It increased in funding under Trump 1. It increased in funding under Biden. And now Trump is increasing funding again. So this is an issue that's really been boiling in the pot for quite some time. And it's not something that we can attribute to only one character or only one individual. Yes, right now the hyper nationalist, xenophobic right wing are the people in charge, but don't get it twisted in thinking that merely voting them out and replacing them with someone like Kamala Harris or Pete Buttigieg or Joe Biden's corpse again, don't get it twisted. That will not solve these issues. And right now, I mean, just look at the interests involved in making this happen. The very technologies that are being used to surveil and track and attack the people in this country are the ones that have been developed and enhanced by the security state overseas. There's a number of corporations, a number of major ones, that are working with the Israeli occupation and the Israeli genocide in Gaza, and that are getting contracts with American corporations to turn that same technology on the people. Uh, Google and Microsoft are just one example of major corporations that have cloud services and artificial intelligence services that are contracted out to the Israelis, and they're also contracted to the U.S. intelligence agencies, and now they're also contracted out to uh, uh, immigrations and customs enforcement. This is a behemoth that sits at the top of everything that's going on right now, and we need to start connecting those views in everyone's mind. Like there's a company. I believe let me see if I can find the company name. But they are doing precisely what I'm talking about. They're doing the
What, Core
exact
Civic or the
same.
Geo Group?
Well, Core Civic and Geo Group are kind of staples of
Hmm.
the American incarceration industry and security state. All these activists and all these immigrants that are being rounded up, and yes, they are going after activists too. All of them. I mean, they get funneled into these federal prisons, and these federal prisons contract out to Core Civic and Geo Group, and also the some of the largest corporations in America. But even if I can't find these other corporations, the issue remains the same. The weapons that get tested and the surveillance networks and these apparatus of control that gets tested abroad is turned on our own people here. This is one of the core and one of the most popular definitions of fascism, is when the violence that the empire and uh, the mentality that the empire has wielded overseas to advance its interests, to advance corporations, to advance uh, dreams of expansion, is being turned on us because the global expansionary empire is reaching its limits as we're seeing the rise of other countries. And so the empire needs to turn its gaze inward. And those technologies that have developed over time, they are being pointed at us. Another key example of this is the militarization of the standard police force, not just these new ICE goons that we see running around, but also just your everyday run of the mill police force. Uh, there was a nice graph by Stephen Simler that documented how, as American troops left Iraq over the last few decades, the drawdown, uh, their weapon and their military equipment, they started going to local police officers, and so the value of the military equipment held by just local PDs has increased dramatically. And now we're seeing those local police departments help with this ICE crackdown. It's a police state that has been brewing for quite some time, and it's really disturbing to see it, deployed in action.
Well, do you think that we are already here? Because everyone speaks of the police state as something that's in some galaxy far, far away, that we're marching into it. Uh, it seems as if we're already here, Bryce Green.
No, I think we're already here. In fact, The Intercept had an article a few weeks or a few days ago that
Hmm.
pretty much says the same thing. That the American police state, the ones that we kind of think of in abstract terms, are like, oh, it can't happen here. It's always coming, but it never arrives. It's like tomorrow, right? It'll never actually be here. But if we look around us and we look at the way that even American citizens are being treated. They're able to be abducted off the streets as long as no one sees them, as long as no one does anything. They are able to stay in federal custody for months and months. And every day we're treated with stories of people who have had that very same thing happen to them. People who were abducted, they were never taken before a judge to prove their citizenship status or anything, and so they languished in a prison for months. That is the very police state that your Alex Jones types, even your crankiest libertarian is worried about in their nightmares. It's here. Uh, Once you're able to start abducting people without any due process whatsoever, without them going before a judge, without even having to present a warrant, I mean, you've already lost the battle for civil liberties, and it's really only a matter of degree. It's only a matter of when that apparatus is going to be turned against who. Right now ICE is now expanding their net. They're not just going after people they say are immigrants and criminals and illegals or whatever. They're now turning to actual activists. They subpoenaed Meta recently for data relating to Instagram accounts that are critical of ICE. Apple recently capitulated to ICE pressure by removing an ICE tracker app that is perfectly lawful and perfectly complies with Apple's terms of service. But since they are sucking up to the federal government and their crackdown, they are removing some people's line of defense. And so this corporate state that undergirds all of the decisions of empire, be it immigration, war and peace, the decision to keep the pharmaceutical companies happy with Obamacare, the decision to let hundreds of thousands of homeless people lay on the street, that apparatus does so because it is profitable, and making the climate more favorable to their profitability is really the only thing they care about. So Apple isn't going to stick up for the unheard, the lowest, the least privileged among us. They're not going to do that. If it endangers their relationship with the Trump administration, who has the ability to make or break Apple's profits, well, then it's an easy decision for them. And it's the same for Meta, right? You recently saw Mark Zuckerberg sitting and palling it up with Donald Trump. It's one of Mark Zuckerberg's new personas is now MAGA Zuckerberg or whatever. Uh, uh, he doesn't care about people's safety, security, privacy. He doesn't care about activist movements in America. He's part of the corporate state. And so that's what Chicago represents to me. And that's what was happening in DC. And that's what was happening in LA. And that's what's going to happen in Portland. And that's what's going to happen in more and more cities around the country uh, until someone seriously takes the steps to stop this. But again, going back to this issue of two parties, the Democratic Party doesn't seem to be doing much of anything to adequately address the situation. And that's for structural reasons. I mean, like I said, Joe Biden was one of the people who increased funding to ICE. He was one of the people who increased deportations. He increased the rhetoric aimed and targeting immigrants. He fully ceded the ground to the right wing, said, now everything the right wing is saying is true. They are coming in here, they are killers, and we're going to be the ones to save you from the killers. Well, Trump came in and said, no, we're going to be the ones to save you from the killers. And here's how we're going to do it by militarizing the police, by sending in the National Guard, by sending in the federal agents to come and crack some skulls, scare some people, and terrorize the communities around America. That is the genie that's been let out of the bottle. So the Democrats really have very little interest in seriously addressing the root causes of it.
Let me bring this to your attention. This is something to which you alluded, because I've been looking at the Intercept as well. Um, the Wired magazine, and I'm sure you read this. ICE wants to build out a 24/7 social media surveillance team, which is one of the things that we've been talking about and we need to be concerned about it. Documents show that ICE plans to hire dozens of contractors to scan X, Facebook, TikTok, and other platforms to target people for deportation. Uh, it begins this way: United States immigration authorities are moving to dramatically expand their social media surveillance, with plans to hire nearly 30 contractors to sift through posts, photos, and messages, raw material to be transformed into intelligence for deportation raids and arrests. Federal contracting records reviewed by Wired show that the agency is seeking private vendors to run a multi year surveillance program out of two of its little known targeting centers. And it continues on. Uh, I have always had this uneasy relationship with social media because I always felt that we were being tracked. we've complained about, oh, China, there's no free speech. They have a social, uh, basically a social credit score. I can't help but feel that that's what we have here, Bryce Green. We're using or should I say, the immigrants and migrants are being used as a pretext for surveilling uh, everyone here. What do you make of that?
I think this is a perfectly accurate reading of the situation. There's an excellent book by author Yasha Levine. It's called Surveillance Valley. It's the military history of the internet. It talks about how the origins of the internet and a lot of the infrastructures that surrounded it aren't really in the liberatory, freedom-loving, leftist. They don't have those origins. Their origins are in counterinsurgency, the ability to extract large amounts of information from a population and use that information to adequately repress and predict potential problems, potential challenges to the dominant social order. It grew out of counterinsurgency in Vietnam and the Philippines and other areas. But this technology was designed kind of from the ground up with this ethos in mind of being able to command and control these populations of people. And the social media companies, they're really an extension of that. Google, for example, was guided by the development of Google in the 90s was guided in part by elements of the Central Intelligence Agency, who were very interested in the capabilities of the ability to sift through this massive amount of data and get useful insights. That's really one of the origins of Google. People can go and read this excellent article in Mint Press called the CIA, how the CIA created Google. I mean, it's right there. Facebook, very quickly was revealed to be a surveillance machine that was able to extract a lot of information from people. The like button was a new way to extract some behavioral data from people. What they like, what they do, how to correlate that. And so far, this technology has really been geared towards serving ads to people, right? Trying to get you to buy like a new fridge or some plastic crap off of Timu. But the potential for that apparatus to be used for police state and controlling populations and actively intervening in populations to ensure that the social order is maintained has always been there. And so I think when you're describing the immigrants being used as a pretext for this thing, I think it's the exact same thing that was happening with the scare of terrorism in the early 2000s, or right after 9/11. You could justify any sort of invasion of privacy or egregious violation of the Constitution by simply saying that, well, do you want the terrorists to win? Do you want the terrorists to kill your children? Do you want there to be an anthrax bomb that goes off right outside of your window? Do you want there to be another 9/11? That was a very easy manipulating language to deploy back then. And just like now, you had the propaganda apparatus of the right saying, well, every single thing that's happened is because like some immigrant got into the country and shouldn't have. You don't have that job because of an immigrant. This person was murdered because of an immigrant. Immigrants make our country strain for debt. It's overburdened healthcare system. It's immigrants, immigrants, immigrants. It's a scapegoat. And so you have to stop the immigrants by building a wall and building a surveillance state and deploying federal troops to the into the localities. And if you look at the polls on the right wing, this is actually an extremely popular move, right? They're not saying, oh, Trump is making our movement look, vile and vicious, and we just want to protect America. No, they're cheering it on. They're saying, bring in the tanks. Occupy these cities. Go to war against these Democrat state mayors. They're cheering it on. And so, along with this rhetoric, along with this heated climate, comes the cash grab. Just like in the global war on terror, all of these companies start lining up to say, hey, I can track terrorist attacks before they can happen. Hey, I can build you a database that can monitor. Potential threats. I can build a database that correlates other databases. It's a gold rush for all these Pentagon contractors, all these military guys and their buddies to get some consulting contracts. just to make millions and billions of dollars. It's a grift that enables fascism. It's a grift that will end up building a surveillance state against the people, and that surveillance state is going to get deployed. There's no doubt about it. We actually see insights into what the Trump administration wants to expand his military powers to be able to do. I'm sure you've heard of NSPM 7, right? It's I believe it's a national security presidential memo designating what new indications of quote unquote terrorism are, right? Again, back to the global war on terror. If you call something terrorism, then you can really do anything. If you call Venezuelan fishermen terrorists, you can blow up their boat. If you call people at home terrorists, well, then you can imprison them without any trial. But NSPM 7 is a pretty alarming document because it lists so many normal and perfectly rational beliefs as indicators of terrorism. It's things like anti-capitalism, support extremism on migration, quote unquote, extremism on race, extremism on gender, hostility towards those who have traditional American views on morality, hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on religion. This memo was given to the national security apparatus to direct them to look at the people who exhibit these traits as potential terrorists. If you're anti capitalist, you're a potential terrorist. If you're anti American, you're a potential terrorist. If you are whatever an extremism on race means, if you're deemed to be an extremist on race, you are a terrorist. And so you have all these mundane designations that kind of apply to a sizable chunk of the population. I mean, just look at the polls on anti-capitalism in America, right? The younger generation is far more anti-capitalist than any generation that's preceded it.
Wait a minute, but hold
Which
that thought, because that net casts far and wide. I mean, you can look at
it's
Gaza,
crazy.
because it's the overwhelming majority of young Republicans oppose our policies in the Middle East. And they made a
Right.
complete shift on Gaza, complete shift. That's akin to their countrymen and women on the left, if you will, the so-called left. And so I'm trying to find out. That's why I said I don't know um, if. Well, I don't know. I don't believe uh, that this dragnet is going to stop in blue cities and states. I think it's for everybody, because
Oh,
in this time of economic want and social instability, everybody, people on the left and right and in between and outside, are feeling insecure, and you can feel the anger growing. What say you?
I agree. Like as conditions rapidly deteriorate in America, both politically, but also especially economically and socially as a result of that, well, you're going to see a lot of different things happen in American society that start to challenge and shake the foundations of the social order. Um, some of it will be positive political changes. People are going to start questioning the justification for having two corporate controlled parties that run the whole show, and maybe they'll start organizing against it, and people are already starting to do that. But there will also be the other way. People will fall into despair, and as people get more desperate, they turn to crime, and as people get more uh, disempowered, they turn to drugs and vice and other things, and the conditions around the country are going to deteriorate faster than many of us will expect. If for no other reason than the economic situation around the world is going to harm Americans, so that prices rise so much. I mean, we've seen that with Trump's tariffs, right? They like to show these inflation numbers. They say that, oh well, inflation's only at 2% this year over year, so we're in great shape. Well, I mean, the price isn't going down. It just means that the price is rising a little slower than it was. The prices are still high and wages have not caught up. And so that people are starting to feel that. There are all sorts of economic indicators, and you can go and look at reports from Adam Tooze and other economists about this. But things like the amount of credit card debt that Americans owe, soaring to record highs. The amount of delinquency on mortgages, it's soaring to record highs. The Even just the subjective measures, right? How people view their economic conditions, it's soaring to record lows in terms of satisfaction. How people are feeling about the health of the economy. You look at surveys, you look at polls. They are feeling worse than they did before the financial crisis of 2008. And if we look at the the actual economic numbers of 2008, if we look at something like actual employment, right? Not the fake employment numbers that they give us. Employment statistics as in percentage of the adult population who is employed, right? That's not how they calculate the standard employment numbers. They have a whole other strange measure for it. But if you look at that number has been steadily declining. Employment has been declining. It's never recovered, even on the eve of COVID 19. It had never recovered to what it was before 2008. And today, it has never recovered to what it was before 2020. These conditions are things that people feel on a material level, even if you can have some fake version of employment statistics that don't reflect that. These are the conditions that Americans are facing, and these are the conditions that they're throwing a surveillance state on top of. Of course, if you're the empire, it makes sense to throw a surveillance state on a population that's being economically disenfranchised. People tend to react to that. People tend to organize and fight back against systems that oppress them. Uh, but if you have a digital ID system, or you have people tracking social media 24/7, or if you have heavily armed federal agents on every corner, well, that'll certainly reduce the likelihood of any effective mobilization against the fascism that we're seeing in front of us. And so it makes perfect rational sense for them to do that. And of course, it makes perfect rational sense to connect that analytically to the economic conditions that are on the ground right now.
Do you think that that's going to hold this back? I mean, I'm looking at the all of the political activity and the social dynamism that led into the FDR presidency while we were in the midst of the Great Depression. You had people who were testing out all of the different isms. You had Americans who are actively railing against capitalism. That's why I think many of FDR's policies were clearly socialist, because he was called a traitor to his class, right? Because he had to do something radical because the Gilded Age had such vast wealth at the top, and just the bottom dropped out in terms of the impoverishment of most of the 99%, if you will. So, I mean, can you ever really shut down, shut people down? I mean, can that really happen?
Well, it'll never be permanent, right? There will never be a crushing of the human spirit, because that's just the nature of human beings. No matter what, there will always be humans to fight back against oppression, because it's not natural, right? Man was born free, but everywhere he's in change. It's not a natural thing.
Mhm.
But the problem with comparing now to the Gilded Age and the Great Depression and the FDR era is that the political class seems to be a lot less attuned to the sensibilities of the general public than they were even in the Gilded Age,
Why do
right?
you say that?
Well, in the Gilded Age, in the time, that the whole period, the late 1880s to that ended with the Progressive Era, where they had all these antitrust acts, where they started busting the trusts. That was a very popular thing that the first Roosevelt
With
did.
Teddy Roosevelt, right?
With Yes, yeah, back then. But with FDR, the government was able to use some of that framework to reinvigorate the anti-competitive movement, to antitrust movement, to break up big banks, break up Alcoa, go after uh, profiteers, and ensure that the general public was getting its fair share. They had unions behind them. They had the American Communist Party. They had all of this going for them to push FDR in the direction that he ended up going. And also the fact that the New York political system was able to accommodate someone like FDR or FDR was able to navigate his way through that political scene was a pretty it was an impressive thing at the time. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we have anyone who even wants to take that mantle today,
Mm.
even with the benefit of hindsight, even with FDR as this model that they can look towards. No one seems to want to do that. Joe Biden talked a little bit about it. He was very excited when the Build Back Better stuff, which didn't really do as much as he touted, but something. But he was very excited about being hailed as a new FDR, even if it was a misplaced attribution. But very quickly, he stopped doing anything that could earn him that title. Attacking unions. He started, advancing all these crazy wars at the expense of his domestic program, and anything he did good in his domestic program. Again, he had Lena Khan at the FTC, he had Rohit Chopra, he had decent people. He had Jennifer Arbuzzo at the NLRB, decent people. This wasn't a center of his focus. In fact, I'm convinced that Biden knew very little about all the good things that were happening in the regulatory frameworks in his administration. And so, like, he doesn't care about that. The people coming up in the Democratic Party, with a few exceptions, maybe Zoran Mamdani might be the maybe an exception to this, but no one is embracing overtly socialist policies. No one is embracing overtly anti corporate rhetoric. And to the extent that they are, you can tell that they don't mean it. Because the people who the Democratic Party is looking at right now for 2028 are two of the biggest corporate shills to ever walk this earth, Kamala Harris and Pete Buttigieg. Kamala Harris, who just lost an election because she's widely unpopular, and the presidency that she was associated with was widely unpopular, and that she really had nothing to offer the general public except something like joy or whatever, nothing serious. So you have her, and you also have Pete Buttigieg, who, when polls have consistently showed, has 0% black support, has done very little to prove himself, really was a wreck at the Department of Transportation until some of the antitrust people started taking the reins. And he really has nothing to offer people. Both of them enter the 2020 race, right? After Bernie Sanders was clearly going to be running.
Mhm.
Why did they do that? They didn't do that because they believed in Sanders' agenda, because they believed in Medicare for all, because they believed that the corporate state had too much power and it was time to take some back. They didn't do that. If they did believe that, they would have simply supported Bernie Sanders, said now is the time for some real change. Let's get behind this guy and let's do it. And they didn't do that. They decided to run for themselves and split the public attention and the donor base's funds, and split that so that Bernie Sanders would have a lower chance of winning. Kamala Harris couldn't even win her home state in that race, and Pete Buttigieg ended up dropping out after some advice from Barack Obama, who was again another major failure on this front. Both of them are being looked at as the future of the Democratic Party. The only person in the Democratic Party who's extremely popular isn't even in the Democratic Party, right? Bernie Sanders. He's not in the Democratic Party, and there's not even, and he himself doesn't seem to want to continue seriously challenging the party establishment in any meaningful way. So there's no one waiting in the wings who's going to look at the American carnage around us and offer serious solutions that would get us out. There's no one. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people who, some rising Congress people maybe I've never heard of, who are principled and genuinely want to help people and are genuinely willing to take the steps to do so. But right now, it doesn't seem like they're anywhere. And if they are, the mainstream of the Democratic Party hates them.
Well, and that's the rub, because when you do want to make change and you make noise in that direction, the party shuts you down. And then within, I would say, within the black middle class, you get shut down because you're told that you're a traitor to the party. And it's like, wait a minute. I'm less interested in party politics and more interested in the advancement of people. And when you put that forth, I mean, you get shut down in many, 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 many spaces. And that's at a time when now we've had a gutting of our healthcare industry, you know, industry. system, industry. I mean, and now we have got uh, this government shutdown. They're going to fire tens of thousands of more people. It just, the hemorrhaging has not stopped, and it's not stopping. And trying to have a discussion about that, a meaningful discussion in which we don't, excuse me, engage in Trump derangement syndrome. And yes, I'm saying that because Trump is so much bigger than the president. I mean, if you don't look at Palantir, I mean, if you don't understand the technocracy that we're in, I think you're missing so much. If you don't understand the military industrial complex and how much money is in the military, I think we're missing the boat, Bryce. And I'm trying to figure. I mean, if we're not concerned, many of us, um, well, said, the migrants, many African Americans said the migrants need to get out of Chicago, or they need to get out of our country. Well, then they did a sweep, and it meant us too. So what do you do?
Yeah. No, the fact
Because
that
there is confusion. I think Gene Toomer wrote that a century ago. There is confusion, or was it Jesse Fawcett? One of the two. One of these great writers from the Harlem Renaissance. There is confusion because I don't think that we really understand what we're up against. We looked at. I mean, the Trump inauguration. You saw more publicly wealthy people on the front row than I've ever seen in my life. People uh, of Jeff Bezos's ilk and Mark Zuckerberg were typically not on the front row. They were people that you saw after the parade was over. They were waiting in the Oval Office to shake your hand and leave. It's like they were waiting right there. I just thought it was interesting. It was telling. I was just trying to figure out what they were trying to tell us, Bryce.
well, it's clear what they're trying to tell us. They tell us that they own the country and that they're in charge, and what they say goes. I mean, this is like one of the most uh, defining aspects of the American political system is that we have an ostensible democracy. We have these houses, these political structures that you get to go and vote for someone, and maybe someone will represent you. But on top of that, there sits another structure, a structure that ensures that everything within that electoral boundary is severely limited. The people who select the people that you get to vote for. And we have a primary process for parties, but we do have a pre-primary process in which people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and the people who invest in those corporations, the people who run half the country, people like BlackRock, they decide what is within the realm of acceptable discourse. And they do this with the simple reason: politicians are very easy to buy in this country. They're exceptionally easy. If you want a bill pass, if you're like a coal corporation, and you want some nice regulations passed in your state, you can give like $10,000. That'll get a vote. That'll get a vote. For a congressman in federal at the federal level, it's not really that much more. A few $1,000s. That'll get you a congressperson. And the people who are able to uh, mobilize that wealth in mass are the people who are able to progress in this political system. And that's how you get a system in which these corporations and their interests take precedence over the needs of you and me and my family and your family and just normal people. That's the American political regime. That is what we're seeing when we see all of these rich people go and kiss the ring of Trump. They they picked him. He's their guy. And so you can expect that all of his policies will be reflective of that, up to and including the Epstein files. Like we had one of the major scandals of our time was implicating some of the most richest and powerful people, corporations, intelligence agencies in the world. And Trump ran a campaign on talking to uh, talking to his base about releasing the Epstein files, and we're gonna bring truth to Epstein. We're gonna release it, and he did the complete opposite, right? He hired Cash Patel in there to just lie to the public about how there's nothing to see here. And of course, the public didn't like that, and so forced the administration to lie some more. I mean, this is it's really just simple as that. And I everything from the crackdown on immigrants, the selective crackdown on immigrants, everything from the increase of funding to the surveillance state to NSPM 7, all of that is mandated by the dictates of uh, the corporate state. And I think that that analysis should frame every political decision that we make in the future. It should inform how we view the Democratic Party. It should inform us how we vote in our city council elections, or I guess you guys call them aldermen, but it should inform that. It should inform who we give our money to. It should inform what media programs we tend to support. That is the governing logic of this country, and the sooner we're able to realize that, the better shape we'll be in.
Where do you see this the deploying of these troops going? I mean, last week the president did say that we're going to deploy the troops to American servicemen and women to our cities, and we're going to deal with the enemy within, and we will use our cities as places with which to train our military. How will that work, and how will that work out in your estimation?
Well, in my estimation, if trends persist, if no one does anything to stop this, if no one takes the necessary actions, well, then it'll go exactly how he says. There will be billions and billions of dollars of contracts to the contractors to manage surveillance systems. There'll be databases of people to track and watch out for. There'll be We'll be looking at checkpoints where we have to show our papers, or it's like the worst case scenario when you think of American fascism. It's staring us right in the face. Tanks on the street, activists getting abducted, held incommunicado, suspension of the writ of habeas corpus. That was one of those things that, a lot of people raised a stink about in the wake of 9/11. But when that remained in effect, no one said anything. Uh, One of the things that I've been looking at for a few years is what's called the continuity of government network, which was effectively a way to subvert the Constitution in the event of a national emergency that decapitated the country. So it was originally meant to protect against a nuclear attack, right? If Washington gets nuked, we want to make sure that the government keeps on going. But this poses some problems, right? Who decides who is in charge when the people who everyone elected goes away? Who decides who's in charge and when exceptional measures need to be taken? Well, my friend Aaron Good wrote a book about the American exception, in which he takes the Schmittian sense of sovereignty, like the sovereignty of a country. Sovereignty is he who decides the exception. And when there are exceptional measures that are able to be implemented by an element within the state, well, that element is then sovereign. And so the ability to manage this continuity of government network uh, is where sovereignty lies. And after 9/11, the US declared a state of emergency that has never been reviewed by Congress. It's never been overturned. You can go and check the internet. At the end of August this year, Trump renewed for another year the 9/11 post 9/11 state of emergency. It says due to the certain terrorist attacks and the threat of incoming terrorist attacks, we have to maintain the state of emergency. This was the same memo that was signed by Biden last year, by Biden the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. It's the same one that was signed by Trump 4 years in a row before that, the same one that was signed by Obama 8 years before that, and re signed by Bush every year since 9/11. This is a state of emergency. And one of the things that scholarship on this COG network has uncovered is that it did, in fact, uh, uh, plan for the suspension of the Constitution. It involved implementing martial law, mass roundups. In the 80s, they actually had plans to round up millions of American black people because they represented such a subversive and threatening force to the Reagan administration. These plans never stopped. They didn't stop making these. In fact, as recently as 2008, we received reporting from, I believe it was Tim Sharrock, who found that the government had a database called Maine Core, which had around 8 million names that were to be rounded up if this state of emergency was to be implemented. Well, since we're in that state of emergency, we have now had the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads, where constitutional procedures can be suspended and ignored by fiat. And if someone decides to, implement some sort of, mass internment of dissidents in the country, they have a legal and bureaucratic apparatus that could handle that. And this is assuming that you would even need that consent. This is assuming that someone would object if there is no memo telling them that this is legal. Right now, we might not even have that, right? We don't even have a Supreme Court that's saying, hey, maybe we should look at this. Maybe we should try and protect people's rights. No, we have a sycophanted Supreme Court that's willing to allow Trump to go along with any sort of harebrained scheme that Stephen Miller cooks up. We have a federal judiciary that for the last few decades has been infiltrated by right-wing ideologues via the Federalist Society. Another one of these billionaire oligarch-funded institutions aimed at shifting our judicial culture far to the right. If you have that, who even needs a national state of emergency? Who even needs to declare an imminent danger? All you need to do is whip up the public and tell the ICE guys to go and start rounding up people. And if a few judges disagree, then you can have them arrested, like Trump has already done. And if the media criticize you, you know that you can just do whatever you want because no one's going to do anything. Chuck Schumer is going to write a strongly worded letter to you if he doesn't like what you're doing. So that effectively means that you can keep doing that. So not only is there a legal, constitutional or formal method by which the executive has the ability to usurp our freedoms and usurp sovereign power from the people, but there's also a culture in America that encourages it. There's a culture in America that has grown completely averse to checking any sort of executive power, and it's a culture that's developed every time the president bombs somebody without Congress authorizing it, and then no one says anything. It's every time the president starts a war and no one says anything about it. Every time the president goes after and imprisons dissidents, like every time they go after a Julian Assange or an Edward Snowden, without there being massive pushback and consequences, that's eroding this culture that would be able to defend against something like that. But it's almost gone now. And so, as I said, if trends persist and Trump decides to use American cities as a training ground for their wars abroad, well, then there doesn't seem to be anything that can stop that. And that's a very depressing thought. That's a very disturbing thought. But like I said, it's contingent on trends persisting, and trends persisting is contingent on people being complacent. As long as there are activists, as long as there are people willing to stand up and fight back and speak out and meet your neighbors and join with your community, join an organization, link arms, get into the street, engage in serious political struggles, try and win some city council or congressional seats or something, direct action. As long as there are people willing to take those steps, then there is hope, there is opportunities, there is something that can be done. But no, there's no guarantee that that will be enough. But there is a guarantee that if no one tries, the worst will come.
What would you like to say before we go? Because we see now that the troops have been deployed just outside of Chicago, and we can expect them to show up in the city at any time. And we've talked about mass surveillance and surveillance of social of our social media. I don't want people to go away, and certainly you've not made us feel hopeless. Indeed, what you just gave us was a formula for change. It's on us. Remember, Dr. King in his time was a dissident, and he was killed for it. Medgar Evers was a dissident, and he was killed for it. Malcolm X was a dissident and he was killed for it. Fred Hampton was a dissident. After that, we decided not to kill dissidents, but what you do is you take them out by 1,000 tiny cuts, and we reshape them in our image, and we don't understand their work at all. That's one of the, I would say, one of the things that fills me with not anxiety, but certainly I don't want, oh, God gives me enough time to let people know the work that Reverend Jackson has done, because I see them trying to remake them and reshape him in their image. He wanted to save the Democratic Party. No, he was fighting to save the Republican democracy. Okay. We were able to onboard into American politics Bryce Green not even 20 years after the Voting Rights Act had been signed. We were still locked out. So you had young black Republicans for Jesse Jackson, right? And this is someone who ran for president advocating for Mandela, who was a terrorist, even as president of the of the Republic of South Africa. Someone who was advocating for the Palestinians. That almost got him killed. You just keep on going. But we have to keep on going. Otherwise, they will win and they shouldn't. What is your final thought?
Well, I guess my final thought would be keep fighting. If you are not fighting, if you're not part of an organization, if you are not linked up with communities of who are struggling and resisting and providing support to people who need it, then join it. They are always looking for people just like you who are feeling, disconnected, atomized, and in despair at the state of things, and understandably so. But things aren't going to change if you just start feeling bad. Things aren't going to change unless you get out there and do something about it. And so I encourage you to do that. There are dozens of organizations, almost certainly. Just look around. Look around. Look on the internet. Look on Facebook. Look on Instagram. Look at the people who are doing the work in your community, and you'll find it.
How can we reach out to you on social media? I see at the Green BJ. Don't cross him now, because he does not. He loves to mix it up, and he will do that with you. How can we reach out to you on Substack and places like that?
You can find me at Substack, just Bryce Green Substack, Bryce Green's newsletter. You can also find me on Twitter at the Green BJ, and hopefully I'll have some more projects to announce for you down the road. But that's what we got right now.
All right, everybody. Bryce Green, one of my favorite people in the world. It's always a joy to have him here on the Santita Jackson Show, AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Bryce, it has been an